Hello, and welcome to this webinar on e-commerce in Africa, brought to you by GSMA and Lagos Business School. My name is Olayinka David West of the Lagos Business School, where I also lead the Sustainable and Inclusive Digital Financial Services Initiative. And it's a pleasure to be hosting this webinar talking about very important dimensions of commerce and activity within our economic systems in Africa. This webinar, the Lagos Business School, as you know, is a graduate business school of Pan-Atlantic University that seeks to create and develop responsible managers that will solve Africa's institutional and social problems. And why is e-commerce an important area? E-commerce is not only important because of the activity it brings in, but the sector we're talking about. The MSMEs are also a critical factor or a critical segment in any African economy or in any economy. And what we're trying to look at here and unpack is how do we unleash the power of MSMEs through e-commerce? And we're going to be going through a very interesting day today where we're going to look at some of the findings from the GSMA study, focusing on Nigeria in particular, and then expand the conversation in a panel discussion with great panelists from across the sector, operating in different states and different parts of Nigeria as well as Africa. And then we'll come back and have a Q&A session. So please, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, and and also try and give us, tell us which of the panelists you want to address your question, and then we will also present those questions to you. So when we think about e-commerce, let's not just think about it as buying and selling, but let's think about it as how do we enhance livelihoods and how do we enhance the prosperity of all those MSMEs working in the sector. At Lagos Business School, we've been looking at some of these sectors since 2006, when we started looking at marketplaces as Jumia and Konga were coming up in Nigeria. And one of the interesting findings is that some of the issues still remain the same. We have issues around logistics, we have issues around business and management skills, and we have issues around other distribution factors and infrastructure. So through this conversation today, the call to action is, how do we start to build strategies that can work to unlock what the MSMEs can do and what we can ensure that we leverage continental free trade agreements like AFTA and other opportunities to ensure that MSMEs can really grow and thrive in our sectors. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to hand back over to my colleague Nigam, who would give you a presentation of the research findings, and then we'll go into the panel discussion. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you very much, Professor Yinka. And yes, indeed, thank you very much for joining us today for what should be a really interesting conversation on e-commerce in Nigeria and in other African markets more widely. I am here from the GSMA, and for those of you who don't know the GSMA, we are an industry organization. We represent the telecoms industry and the wider communications ecosystem, and we have almost 1,000 members. Within the GSMA, we have GSMA's foundation arm, which is called Mobile for Development. Mobile for Development researches and invests broadly in digitalization for development. We work with a range of donor and development partners, our biggest partner being the UK FCDO, but others such as the GIZ, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as USAID are some of the partners that we work with. And again, while our work is quite broad-ranging, we focus on 4 key themes, which is digital inclusion, ensuring that no one is left behind in digital, financial inclusion, digital financial inclusion. We also look at resilience to climate change, as well as digital for humanitarian response. All right, on to the topic of discussion today, which is e-commerce in Nigeria. And how do you unleash the e-commerce opportunity for MSMEs? So to contextualize this presentation, this is some research that my team did last year based on both primary and secondary data. So we worked with the UK Department for Business and Trade, and we surveyed 1,500 MSMEs in 6 African markets, which included Egypt, Ethiopia, Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, and South Africa. So on average, a little over 250 MSMEs in each market were surveyed. These were MSMEs that were already using e-commerce, and we wanted to understand what they saw as opportunities and what they saw as pain points in scaling e-commerce to build their profitability and resilience, given how how significant a role MSMEs play in people's livelihoods, as Professor Yinka also noted. A very quick run through of the agenda. So I have a presentation for about the next 10 minutes or so. Then we have a panel discussion with some excellent experts who are on the ground delivering e-commerce solutions in Nigeria. And then there is a last 15 minutes for questions and closing remarks. As Professor Yinka said, do put your questions in the chat and do try and direct them to the panelist that you would like to have respond. Great. Okay, so moving on to Nigeria. So as I said, we surveyed just over 250 MSMEs. A majority of those are micro, and that's reflective of the MSME landscape in the market more broadly. You can see here also the sector breakdown of the MSMEs we interviewed. So 40%, 111 were in beauty and personal care, followed by consumer electronics, food and beverage, fashion and apparel, and furniture and home, and a few in agri as well. Okay, so the two key findings that we have. So 95% of MSMEs in Nigeria and actually across the region reported that they had experienced increased sales from e-commerce. In Nigeria, 60% of MSMEs also said that they had experienced a decrease in their costs of business operations through selling online. Having said that, we note that in 2020, 2021, only 7% of the total retail sales in Nigeria were through online sales. So there is a gap between what MSMEs report as the benefit and the kind of uptake that we're seeing of e-commerce in the market. Okay. Before we go on to look at what some of the enablers of e-commerce look like in Nigeria, we answer the question, so what type of e-commerce are MSMEs using in Nigeria and in the region? And so you'll see here that Nigeria reflects the wider trend, which is that over half of MSMEs are only using social media to sell online. We looked at 3 channels. So there's social media, then there was e-commerce marketplaces, and then there was selling through your own websites. And so you can see here that about 14% said that they were using all 3 channels. 56% said they were using only social media. And the most popular social media channels for this are WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram. South Africa was the only anomaly here. So South Africa, you'll see there's only about 25% who say that they are using exclusively social media, and you've got 40% using all 3 channels to sell online. Everywhere else, social media prevails as the exclusive e-commerce channel. We then looked at 2 fundamental enablers of e-commerce. One was the status of connectivity in the market, and the other was the cost of devices. Here we have Nigeria's score, which you can see lies somewhere in the middle of all the markets that we surveyed. Just to explain this score, so this comes from GSMA's Mobile Connectivity Index. The index has a wide range of measures that are used to sort of to give an overall score for Nigeria. Here we've honed in on just one parameter, which was network quality. So this looks at latency and upload and download speeds and captures that score. We also looked at the cost of smartphones as a percentage of the average monthly income. And you can see here where South Africa is only 8% of monthly income, and Ethiopia on the other extreme is 77%. Nigeria is somewhere in the middle, but by no means would, 37% is a notable cost of the average monthly income in terms of acquiring a device. Okay. Our research then went on to explore some key building blocks of e-commerce, which include regulations, the uptake of digital payments, the status of delivery and logistics solutions, as well as consumer trust in e-commerce. And so I'll go on to explore what we found in some of these key building blocks. Okay. So most MSMEs told us that they do understand the regulations for trading online. You see here, 76% in Nigeria say that they're not confused about the regulations in trading online. However, almost a third of MSMEs in Nigeria said that they found identity requirements and registration processes for selling online challenging. So that's 27% there. Okay. We then looked at payments, and the question we asked was, what is MSME's preference for for the type of payment that they would like to receive for e-commerce. And actually what was interesting was in some markets where you wouldn't expect it, there was a preference for cash on delivery. So you'll see that in Egypt at 76%, in Ghana at 67%. In Nigeria, what's outstanding here is the statistic is that there was a strong preference for bank and electronic transfers at 67%, which we think is reflective of a strong banking sector as well as a very well-developed payment system. So that statistic definitely stood out in the region versus a preference for cash, persisting preference for cash, which is decreasing, but still there in other markets. Okay. Having said that, over a third of MSMEs in Nigeria did report having experienced a fraudulent or incorrect transaction in conducting e-commerce. So we have that at 34% in Nigeria. Okay. Finally, we looked at logistics and delivery, which is actually a major challenge we find in all markets. And so we asked MSMEs on a range of questions around delivery challenges. And you can see here that about between a fifth and a third sort of responded saying that they had experienced the delivery challenges that are listed on here. So either delayed pickup, the time or money spent to bring goods to a shipper, to onward delivery, slow delivery to a customer. So delivery and logistics were reported as a key challenge across all markets. In Nigeria specifically, the two that predominated were the cost of shipping and delivery, as well as goods being lost or damaged during delivery. Those two featured more predominantly than other challenges. Okay. Finally, we had asked MSMEs whether they see consumer trust as a barrier to the uptake of e-commerce. And you'll see here again that the statistics are quite high, anywhere between a third and half of MSMEs, even more than that actually in South Africa, say that low consumer trust in e-commerce is a major barrier to uptake. And we think that this one is actually worth unpacking because it's worth considering the consumer journey in e-commerce, which is being able to pick a product, having confidence in its quality and having confidence in the company that you're buying it from, having confidence in the fact that when you're paying, you are safe from fraud, that your data is safe, and that if you do make an erroneous transaction, there is some sort of redress mechanism in place to address that. Then there is the confidence that you will have your goods delivered. They will be delivered in good shape, and they will be delivered in the time that you expect them to be delivered in. And also, if the product is not satisfactory or choose to return it, then there is actually a clear process to be able to conduct that return. And in seeing that consumer journey, you can see the many kind of points at which, if the e-commerce system breaks down, then that keeps the uptake of e-commerce low. Okay. Finally, we asked MSMEs what they needed to scale their e-commerce businesses. The statistics we have here are across the region. And so financing was one, loans and credit was 12% of MSMEs highlighted that as a need. But actually, 40% of MSMEs identified capital as their most critical need for growth. We also had many MSMEs say they needed training. This was in the use of marketplaces, which was 12%, social media, 9%, in the use of websites, 10%, and marketing online was 11%. 9% of MSMEs said a lower cost delivery was essential to scaling their businesses, and 14% indicated the need for more skilled workers. For Nigeria specifically, the two needs that focused predominantly were so financing, capital and loans and credit, as well as the need for lower internet costs. Great. Thank you very much. So that was just sharing some facts and figures with you from our research, which we hope will underpin the discussion that is to come. Before I introduce our panelists today, I would like to thank the partners that supported this research, which is the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, as well as the UK Department for Business and Trade. Excellent. So moving on to our panel discussion today. So we have as our moderators, Professor Yinka, who opened. And so you've already had a bit of an introduction to her. She's the Associate Dean at Lagos Business School, very active in digital, advancing digital financial services, and more broadly, I think convening really the public and private sector and getting them to talk and sort of making the changes needed for innovation to progress. We have also my colleague Lauren White from my team, the Central Insights Unit at the CIU, who was involved in and supported this research as our second moderator. We have some excellent, very experienced panelists, and we're very grateful to them for joining us and giving us their time. We have with us Onesi Lawani, who is the director at SMEDAN, which is the Small and Medium Enterprise Development Agency in Nigeria. SMEDAN has the mandate of supporting MSMEs, ensuring rural MSMEs are not left behind, advocating for enabling policy for MSMEs, and also providing, where they can, financing and skills training for MSMEs to progress and move ahead. We have with us Omoniyi Kolade, who is the CEO of Searbit. Searbit is a relatively new player in the payment space, launched in 2019, but already operating in, I believe, 13 markets. And we're really looking forward to asking Niyi more about Pan-African payments, especially for e-commerce, and also operating in Nigeria with the payment service. We have Onochi Eche Chukwuma, who is the manager of e-commerce at Konga, which is one of the biggest regional e-commerce marketplaces, one that many of you might be familiar with. Onechi has been there for the last year, overseeing e-commerce across all markets. And last but not least by any means, we have Romain Poirot-Lelik, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Africa Delivery Technologies, which is a startup launched in 2018. So he's an entrepreneur coming also from a policy and advisory background, and operating in Nigeria, offering last mile services in urban areas, but operating across the country. With that, I will hand over to Professor Yinka for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you all panelists again for joining us in this conversation. So I'm going to start off with you, Mr. Lawani from SMEDAN, because I think that you are the central authority for MSMEs. And since we're talking about MSMEs, so I'm going to start with the general question. Can you just sort of tell the House, what does SMEDAN do to support MSMEs in e-commerce?
Okay, thank you so much for giving the agency this opportunity to speak to our target group. And like I said, when we're talking at the backside, SMEDAN is an agency of government established to facilitate their starting their growth sustainably. And we've been doing this for the past 20 years. And over time, we've discovered that we can't run away from e-commerce because of the issues that are coming up, the issues that revolve around financing, the issue that revolves around sales, marketing, and even standards. So we have been, in our own way, trying to see how we can link up, create platforms for MSMEs where they can have easy access to e-platforms. We have in our offices where MSMEs can actually come, where MSMEs can actually come and have access to some of our facilities using it. Then we are also turning our industrial development centers, which numbers about 23 now, to enterprise centers where MSMEs can come and have access to every sort of resources that can help them grow their business and gain access to market both locally and internationally.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lawani. So basically, what I'm hearing is that you're giving them access to resources like computers, internet, and infrastructure. But then, how do we? When you heard what Niyi Nigam presented regarding some of that consumer trust in e-commerce. What are we doing to build that stability? And you talked about standards. So are we trying to build guidelines or standards around trading online and then just bringing them up to speed as to what they need to know? Is there any specific interventions that Smeden is working on?
Yeah, I think maybe what I will need to do is to run us through some of the things that, because we've been interacting with this particular group, for us to have an understanding of the MSMEs and even our Nigerian consumers. Typically, a Nigerian consumer wants to feel or see what he or she is buying, and we cannot throw that away. And the issue of COVID-19 that that most of our MSMEs must latch on to doing their businesses virtually. So we have worked closely with organizations like NIDA that that provide that platform or monitor the platform to ensure that our MSMEs have easy access. Then we are also discussing with them to see how can they bring down the cost of access. We did some surveys, and I think these are some of the issues that we want to raise or discuss later as we progress.
Okay, thank you very much. So we know that COVID was a catalyst for bringing people online because we didn't have the choice during the lockdowns, and then there's that intergovernment collaboration. So let me come to you, Onoche, as one of the earliest providers of e-commerce within the Nigerian segment. So in your view, what the challenges that Nigam presented in terms of regulations, digital payments, delivery and logistics, as well as consumer trust, if you had to rank them, which order, based on your experience, which order would you put them in?
So, I mean, if we're really to rank everything right, I think first off, within the e-commerce space at Conga would be consumer trust, because consumers having trust to come and interact with the platforms really is the most important things, because we don't have the customers coming online, we won't have the opportunity to scale, we don't have the opportunity for the SMEs that we onboard on the platforms to actually make sales and see value that they have from doing business online. So consumer trust would be number one. Secondly, I would say the next one would be logistics, right? Running logistics in Nigeria today has its own difficulties and intricacies, and really how we try to manage this, because customers want to get items online and they still expect to get those items at the same prices they will get them within the same offline space, right? But logistics adds an extra cost to the service which we provide as e-commerce, right? And companies within the e-commerce space have tried to subsidize this cost, as it has been for years. Last year, Nigeria removed their fuel subsidies, and that really affected the industry. So logistics, another major barrier. The next, I think, I'll move to payments, right? So payments in the sense that consumers will usually have issues with failed payments in terms of when they're interacting with gateways on the platform. But I would say Nigeria has really improved in terms of we're talking about payments, right? A lot of the digital banks that come up today, your OPs, your Rem Monies, we also have our own in-house banking system called Conga Pay that we use to try and make payment process seamlessly. Right? So if we're trying to rank the three, I would say trust for sure, very important. Logistics will be the next line. Then the number of payments.
Great, thank you so much. Now, I want to sort of deep dive into that logistics sector. And if you notice, I went into consumer trust with Mr. Lau, and now with the logistics. So I know that Conga did set up their own third-party sort of independent logistics business to sort of support the business. Number one, how is that going? And if your SMEs who are selling in your marketplace don't use that platform, how do they get the logistics done? And what can we do to really enhance that sector and take away some of the bottlenecks? Thank you.
So we set up Conga Logistics to try and solve the peculiar problem of how within the e-commerce space as a marketplace, really, how we could get items from the merchants, which are like the MSMEs, and have them go to the customer, right? Because it's quite different from your traditional retail. Traditional retailer has all products sitting in one physical space, others can come in and they ship out. But we have to go through the leg of first getting the items from the SMEs when they receive an order, and being able to ship them out to the final customer. So with Conga Logistics, we're able to create a solution that permits us for us to have what we call ingestion centers. So the first step is an order is placed on the platform. Merchant receives a notification that order has been placed. Then they now need to proceed to drop off that item at the ingestion center. Right. So with Conga Logistics, what we've been able to do is that first leg of ingestion, we've been able to have that in-house, right? And it helps with the first mile of delivery. So first mile of delivery here would be item has come into a center in Lagos. Order needs to get to Abuja, it needs to get to Kano, it needs to get to Jos, right? So with Conga Logistics, we will essentially handle that first line of delivery that moves to that center. Then with Conga Logistics, we've also started doing the franchisee model. So we use the franchisee model to reach the last mile customer, right? So these are partnerships which are integrated into the ecosystem which Conga Logistics runs, because we have the technology that enables tracking for packages, right? So we bring these smaller companies that do logistics at the last mile level and integrate them into Conga Logistics ecosystem. So orders can be tracked from the point of ingestion, move them into first mile delivery, then to last mile as customer. To the customer side, right? So I mean, there are challenges really in terms of when we're looking at SMEs, because we find out that the areas where we have the ingestion centers, really, those are the clusters which we have the larger population of the SMEs. So we see areas where we don't have ingestion centers close to those. It's like a form of barrier for those MSMEs to come online, to come and do business with us. So as a point of view, right? Each month, each year, we're looking at more partnerships to ensure we extend the service so we can get more people within the bucket. But with Conga Logistics, really, we've been able to internalize that process and ensure with proper training, delivery services are done as they should, and we control the largest part, really, of what it is to ensure products get to customers at a good time.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And we'll come back to you. So I'll hand over to Lauren for another batch of questions with the other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Yinka. So perhaps actually delving in a bit more into the delivery and logistics, I will move over to Roman. So what I wanted to know is if you could just tell me a little bit about Quick and why you entered the Nigerian market to offer e-commerce delivery services. Is there more readiness here than other markets, or was there some other factors that went into your decision?
Well, actually, I'm extremely happy that the studies that you show raise the issue of trust, because it's a fundamental factor to transition to a digital economy where you don't have any direct contact or physical contact with the seller, or between the seller and the merchant and the customer. And we started Quick in 2018, not to do deliveries, but to actually create a set of tools, digital tools, to foster trust between the stakeholders in the e-commerce in Africa. And of course, we started with deliveries because those are the most visible, and also they are the face that the consumer sees on the e-commerce transaction, because they have the contact with there's the only physical contact that you have when you sell online or when you buy online. And I see that Onichi is approving. I know it's a problem that they have been facing, and they have been working very hard to solve. The way I see it, the issue of trust is multiple heads. You have to trust. You need to have trust in the marketplace. You need to have trust in the merchant that is on the marketplace. You need to have trust into the delivery or logistics provider. You need to have the fourth level of trust is the trust that you need to have in the payment solution. And then there is a fifth that you didn't mention, Dr. Yinka, but I would like to raise it as well, is that the merchant needs to have trust into the consumer as well. Because trust is not a one-way avenue, it's a two-way avenue. And Quick cannot do much to work on the trust on the platform, but we have some very reputable platforms in Nigeria, such as Konga or Jumia, or brand names like Health Plus and Med Plus, who are at the forefront of online selling in the beauty and personal care segments. But Quick is contributing in its small way on the delivery. I mean, inventory accuracy or integrity, delivery and payment, which is already a huge endeavor, let's say. So why Nigeria? Well, because first of all, it's an irresistible country to work in, of course, and the challenges that it's facing are irresistible as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And then, so perhaps moving over to Ominiyi to hear a little bit about payments then. So Nigeria really does have some giants in the payment space, and you are a recent entrant. Could you tell us a little bit more about Sirbit and what inspired you to enter the payment space here? And then perhaps if you can also touch on how you're facilitating cross-border e-commerce payments.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. So Sirbit, like you earlier said, right, we started not quite so long. And the idea actually was to address some key opportunities that we've seen, right? And what we all understand now today is that the whole idea about fintechs was all derived from the opportunity we saw from the banking services. Now, the limitation of the bank is what has created most of the fintechs opportunities. We're just breaking the banks to more entity and see how we can drive this opportunity and scale them. And while doing that, we realized that most of the fintechs and payment solutions still goes back and rely back to the infrastructure of the banks. So what Sirbit is trying to do is to make sure that we can build the rails, yes, and for businesses to scale. And then the rails means that every commerce today, the lifeblood of commerce today is payment. So without payment, there's no commerce. And if commerce cannot have that kind of rails desire in any flexibility, that local, regional, then we're going to struggle with all these opportunities we're talking about for commerce. So Sirbit is just trying to make sure that we can build those rails that gives everybody a contribution to the global market.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And could you please tell me about any of the unique challenges of cross-border payments for e-commerce? And what is Nigeria's maturity and bottlenecks in this regard?
Okay, so I think I missed part of the last question, which is the challenges of cross-border itself, right? I think we've looked at what AFTA is doing and the whole initiative behind the PAPs. I think it's actually a good direction, a good initiative. But one thing that is quite very different for us is you're looking at an African market where you have over 54 countries and you have different policies, payment policies, and different regime. Now, for a payment solutions to really scale into Africa today, you need to have different licenses for different local market. That's already a big challenge. It means that for every e-commerce that uses a payment solution in a local market, cannot easily just scale to another market to receive payment from the customers. That's just one. And secondly, you have to look at the interoperability challenges too. We have different payment solutions in the market. You have mobile money, we have cards, and we have maybe cash as a whole. Right. Today, we still struggle with interoperability. There are different markets that have different dominance of payment methods. You understand? You see East African with the mobile money. You see Nigeria with the cards and pay with transfer. And we still don't have interoperability with this payment solution. So it means that I cannot use any payment solution to finalize the transactions, right, as a cross-border. So I think those are key challenges. Now, bringing it back home, right, looking at it for e-commerce as a whole, I feel there's more that needs to be done, right? I can't say there's a full maturity because if we're talking about cross-border, it's more about making sure that there's an element that allows capital movement easily for businesses. We still have a lot of MSME in the offline market in Nigeria today. I think we're not really discussing much about that because if you look at the real trade, you see the real trade between the closed border countries like Ghana, like Cameroon and the rest. And these are elements of people who still moving cash as a whole. Some of them find themselves in social media, but the key element is still within those areas. And what we've realized is that when we build a model like a PAPS today, right, we are not even looking at it from the perception of who are these customers or who are these SME really having financial relationship with. And perhaps it's more or less relating with banks and forgetting that payment has gone beyond banking today. There's a lot of PTech now building those infrastructure, but we don't see them included in the policy, in the framework and all that. And I feel that those are where those really challenges are, and the determination of maturity will determine how everybody's way included actually, right? Because we cannot really talk about maturity when we don't see how the players that really powers them in outside banking are being placed when it comes to policy.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, that was very interesting. So I think now I will go back to Roman, and maybe we can focus on some of the challenges with delivery and logistics. So they seem to be a notable barrier to e-commerce kind of across the region, with high costs and even higher ones when products are cash on delivery based. So we've come across different business models, with some e-commerce platforms keeping their delivery operations in-house, others outsourcing to third parties, and even others completely Uberizing the model. So how do you think Nigeria is doing in terms of the delivery and logistics infrastructure for e-commerce, and which one of these trends or models of delivery seem most viable for Nigeria?
Well, those are all important points. First of all, I would like to underline that from our point of view, cash on delivery and transfer are not mutually exclusive, because what we see the most at Quick is transfer on delivery, transfer on the point of delivery. We believe that cash still has a big future in Nigeria. It's going to take some time for cash to disappear for sure, but more and more customers are switching to cash, to transfer on the point of delivery, and this is made possible by the great all the great dynamism in fintech startups in the country, with Money Points and Searbit, I'm sure, and other companies that are proposing efficient solutions, and with who we can integrate. Quick has chosen to Uberize logistics because this is how you can scale up, in our view, in the most efficient manner. And it is how you can get the most coverage. I think a big trend that is going to emerge, and that is already used by Konga and Jumia and others, is the capacity for the consumer to pick up their parcels in drop-off locations, and we're working on that with a number of partners to establish a wide network of pickup locations across the country, because with the price of fuel and the price of the inflation, generally speaking, customers, as you mentioned, are looking to reduce the delivery fees on their bill, and so there is a shift from speed to cost in terms of focus. So of course, you still have a lot of customers that want things right away. I think it's a Nigerian feature that they want it before they order it, basically. They want it delivered before they order it. But at the same time, we live in a period where people are extremely price sensitive for obvious reasons. And so we need to provide them with options. And this is what we are doing. And I'm sure other companies are working on the same approach, basically.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And what do you see as some of the key barriers to delivery and logistics kind of expanding, and from those quick deliveries from being able to reach?
Just a quick funny anecdote. We work a lot in the healthcare space, as I mentioned. And I can tell you that on Thursday evenings and Saturday afternoons and Friday afternoons, we have a lot of express delivery requests for beauty products, and also, let's say, more intimate products. And they need to arrive right away. There is some sense of urgency, but so in terms of barriers, I believe it's very important in order to grow the market and to make sure that online shopping, e-commerce becomes a convenience, that access to data, the cost of data becomes more affordable. And I think the members of GSMA need to do some deep thinking all together to see what is the right point, the right balance point, tipping point between the profit, the revenue that they make, and also growing the pie, because Nigeria as a market, in order to realize itself, needs to make data convenience, and with tremendous efforts have been made already in that direction. I think a bit more can be made.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, and thank you for that little anecdote there. I am now going to pass back over to Professor Yinka for some more questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Lauren. And I'm piggybacking on Roman's conversation around the cost side. And I think, Onoche, I'm going to put you on the spot here, because if we need to crash the costs, what do we need to do to really bring the costs down to an affordable level? Because again, there's costs that you're incurring, but then what level of scale do we need, or what else do we need to do to really make this affordable? Thank you.
I'd say the first place we need to start off with, right, is there are a lot of inefficiencies as it is today within the delivery system, right? We have issues of congestion on roads. We have issues of poor addressing system in the country, right? If we can drop those major ones, I think it will help and go a long way, really, if we start removing some of those inefficiencies, right? You have delivery riders that would have to go out about 2 or 3 times to be able to complete a single order, right? And there's an added cost to doing business, but you can only charge the customer once for those failed deliveries, right? You have then we now have the issues of trust, really, again, in terms of people trusting that what is sold is actually what they get. So we have situations where products are sold, get to the customer, customers decline, right? Because we do what's called payment on delivery, right? So we're doing payment on delivery. We do payment on delivery system here to ensure that more customers can trust to come online and shop. But with payment on delivery, we also have the challenge here where orders that are placed, the logistics provider has gone out to do his deliveries, and there's a cost already. So if the customer cancels that particular order, we, the e-commerce company, still needs to bear that cost, right? We must pay the logistics provider for burning fuel. So I think it's first removing the inefficiencies in terms of trust, ensuring that what the customer ordered is exactly what the customer gets to reduce cases of cancellation, right? So removing that is one aspect, because when you remove some of those inefficiencies, that reduce our bottom line generally as a whole, and we now see more uptake. We need more people coming online. We need more people placing orders, because at the end of the day, logistics is a volume business. So it would make sense if we're having the order count is increasing per day. So a truck that is going from Lagos should be pretty full when it's going to Abuja. It makes it easier to spread products across the north. We also have a problem here where about 70 to 80% of the core merchants that are doing volume on our platform are located in Lagos, right? So we have that challenge where customers who are far places, the north, the rural communities, which we are really trying to bring on board for us to ensure we have that scale, right? Because when we look at Nigeria, we talk about the 200 million people we have. Where are those 200 million people actually located? Right? So if we have all the merchants concentrated in a place like Lagos, it means delivery costs will continuously keep going up. So we need to ensure our cities, our MSMEs are more spread, because if we have that spread out, it will help, because it'll be easier if customers within a locality of Port Harcourt could have access to same products at same prices as a merchant that has it in Lagos. That already reduces a big aspect of the cost that goes into doing logistics. So it's a combination of, first, how do we remove the inefficiencies in the logistics system as it is today? How do we remove the aspect and the barrier of trust to ensure the other volumes grow. So inefficiencies, like payments, as we said today now, these are barriers that keep people from coming online. So the more we break down the barriers, the volumes grow. As inefficiencies drop, the cost of doing that would reduce. Then we can transfer those gains to the customer.
Thank you very much, Onoche. And Mr. Lawani, I'm coming to you now because Onoche brought up, when we talk about these issues, they're public sector, they're private sector, they're some are policy related issues. And I think when we're looking at MSMEs, SMEDAN is really that agency that advocates for better policies to enhance some of these things. So let me come back to some of the issues that Onoche mentioned. So we need to grow unit economics to bring down the cost of deliveries. That means we need to scale, having more people trusting e-commerce platforms, having more people ordering things remotely. And then we now need to ensure that we have the road infrastructure to actually move the goods. And then the third one he also mentioned, which was in terms of the spread of the MSMEs themselves. So if we have concentration in Lagos, how easy is it to serve to serve consumers in Kaduna or other places? And then that also increases the cost. So from a policy perspective, is there anything, or does Sweden have a working group, a policy initiative that's really looking at how do we, you mentioned NIDA and data earlier on, but now we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about postal services, and we're talking about location of MSMEs. Is there anything that Sweden is doing to enhance that and to bring that up? Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for this other question. And I would like to start by throwing some light on some things that we need to know. One thing is we have the National Survey of 2021 said that about 18.1% of MSMEs engaged in the use of digital platforms. And it was also reported that the wholesale, the retail trade are mostly, they account for about 23% of the total use by MSMEs, while manufacturing sector only reported 1.8%, while education, as we know, just 10.3%. Now, when we talk about providing facility to make the cost of digital e-commerce low for MSMEs, like I said, we are working strongly and closely with all the enablers. And on our own, we've intentionally, deliberately ensured that we provide capacity building avenues for MSMEs. We are also providing internet infrastructure in our service. And we are also discussing with the government, federal government, that, okay, now we have about 39.6 million MSMEs, and most of them cannot ordinarily get their product across. What do we do? What we are doing now is partnering with other organizations to see how we can take them, place them on market platforms. And what we do specifically in that regard is providing basic infrastructure, because if you want to talk about providing the infrastructure that will be seamless for MSMEs nationally, it will be very expensive for the agency. So what we're doing is partnering with organizations that can help the agency provide such infrastructure in identified clusters and in our own, what we call the common facility centers. We have, for now, established 5 common facility centers, and we are also working on developing the other IDCs to provide such environment for MSMEs to use for marketing their product using the e-commerce platform, or yes, e-commerce platform. And we also have a portal where MSMEs can also display their product. We have the MSME Select program where MSMEs bring in their product, and we help them in marketing it or making it available to the global market.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lawani, because I think one of the areas you just touched on now is this issue of discovery. And I think discovery is also one of the critical areas for MSMEs that we need to know that they're there and they exist. So if you're doing that, but I think, again, I'm also interested in, should we be expecting any new policy changes? Because I think there's certain policy directives that could also help in driving and complementing all the interventions that you're already doing? Is that something we can be expecting?
Yeah, the truth of the matter is that Nigeria is never in shortage of regulations or policies. But I think the major issue has always been the problem of implementation. And I would rather suggest, or we would rather want to look at the need for better coordination among the regulators. We should rather focus on doing more of regulation and ensuring that the space is enabling for MSMEs and even the consumers, and not necessarily focusing on revenue. Then there's also the need for us to have more sustained awareness creation and reorientation targeted at players within the e-commerce community, about consumer rights and protections towards building trust in the e-commerce ecosystem. We have several cases where somebody says, what I ordered is different from what I got. So how do you ensure that we have dispute resolution centers, so that some of these issues that affect trust, that's bringing down the trust on this e-commerce platform is reduced. So what are we doing? We are trying to see how we can use what we can afford for now, using our common facility centers, using the Green Enterprise Village, using the provision of internet access in some of our offices and IGCs to see if we bring that. But for policy, I want to believe that policies, yes, if you look at our last policy, we placed emphasis on the emergence and the need for us to dwell more or adopt more of this e-commerce platform. But how about the implementation? I think that's where the issue. We should be having a roundtable discussions on how do we ensure that the policy that guide this e-commerce platform is properly implemented and all the stakeholders are properly coordinated.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawani. And I think I will come back on offline and take you up on that roundtable, because it's critical, because it's about moving the needle forward, and it speaks to what Roman spoke about, that while we want consumers to understand consumer rights, and Onoche, Roman, how do we also have merchants behave responsibly and not also try and scam people through these e-commerce platforms because of the remoteness of the transaction in that sense? So how do we, and I think it was what Roman spoke to in terms of how do we ensure that we're building a trust ecosystem across all the parties and across all the exchanges and across all the interactions? And we need all of us to sort of partner and ensure that we're working together, because what works for one would work for everybody. And once that trust is broken, it really now begins to sort of deteriorate the relationships and then build distrust. And I think Mr. Lawani had said it at the beginning in his opening remarks, that Nigerians still like physical. They want to touch and feel what they're buying. So how do we help them ensure that when you order something, you're going to get what you ordered, and then you're also going to be, and then the merchant as well, you're going to get your payment for what you ordered, especially when it's the right product or service. So it's not going to come back, well, I don't really like it or something or the other, because then that also increases the attendant costs of doing business in general. So thank you all very much for those questions. And I think, Lauren, do you have any other questions, or we can open up to the audience?
I have perhaps one final question that would be for everyone. So I'm interested to know where you see e-commerce headed in the next 5 to 10 years in Nigeria, and what would kind of be your top 2 actions for making the environment more enabling. So perhaps I can start with Onuchi, if you want to go ahead and answer that question, and we can go through everyone.
Okay, so I'd say if we're looking next 5-10 years, right? I think the future is really bright for the e-commerce space, in terms of on a yearly basis, we continue seeing growth, right? If we're looking at numbers from when Konga was founded in 2012, there's a continuous amount of adoption, and this also goes in tandem with internet penetration and digital literacy levels rising across Nigeria, right? So that has been on a steady increase from our numbers year on year in terms of order volumes and in terms of active merchants that actually have participating on the platform. So in the next 5 to 10 years, we expect that trend to continue to grow. And with that trend growing, we expect with orders driving in larger volume, we expect to scale quicker. We expect to reduce the cost of the services that we are giving to customers. Also, if we're looking at the technology landscape as a whole, there are a few key digital advancements that are happening now that we think are going to be very big for us within the sector, right? If we see what's happening with AI now and the introduction of the large language models, right? One of the very key barriers that we have today is we bring merchants that come online. The process of onboarding them on the system, getting them to list their products, ensuring product descriptions are accurate, right? And it also seems a bit to what Dr. Toke said, right? Because we want to ensure that what the customer sees in terms of the description, in terms of the image, the specification of what's put forward, it's what the customer sees. So we see the impact of AI in helping our merchants that are coming on the platform to be able to list products in a smarter way to ensure they are more accurate. So in that way, we see that would also reduce the barrier in terms of what it is for our merchants today to come online and list products. Because if you read the reports that were shared, the cost of devices in terms of mobile phones is really a big barrier. So with the input of large language models, we will have it that because we have people from Conga that go on the field to register merchants, right? So if we have these models integrated in our system, it will reduce the need for merchants to have these systems 24/7 to be listing products and updating. So we see that integration helping to reduce that particular barrier for us. So we are looking at growth in terms of adoption. We're also looking at some of the technologies that will come within the space and help us break down some of the barriers that we're experiencing today. So these are 2 key things that I think we're looking forward to in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And then maybe moving to Onesi. Do you agree with Onesi?
Okay.
Onesi,
yeah. Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry. I think maybe you cut out for a second, but I think you're back again if you want to go ahead and answer.
Hello?
Hi. Yes, we can hear you fine.
Hello?
Perhaps if we move to... Oh, no, you're okay. Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for it's the technology, the challenge of technology. Now,
yeah.
we Faith Foundation helped us conduct a research, competitiveness research, actually about 2 years back, and it showed that 71% of MSMEs that were surveyed actually used one form of technology or the other, and 82% of the respondents showed that they used the social media platform to get into international access to international markets. Now, in very simple terms, the e-commerce is the way forward for MSMEs, whether in the now or even in the future. Now, what do we really need to do? We should be looking at ensuring that we encourage innovation here in Nigeria. We should be thinking of how do we build the capacities of MSMEs and also create awareness amongst them. We should also be looking at how do we deepen access to digital infrastructure? How do we ensure that we increase basic, we improve and increase basic digital infrastructure here in Nigeria, then also protection against cyber hacks. And this issue of trust, we need to address it. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And now I will go on to Roman, if you want to go in and add anything.
Sure. First of all, I would like to commend what the other panelists already mentioned, and in particular, Mr. Lawani, who I think touched some very crucial issues. What Quick aims to do at its level is to open up to 20 joint fulfillment facilities for merchants. We already have 2 in Lagos. And we aim to open joint fulfillment facilities all over the country. And we do that in partnership with various landlords in a way that will enable a kind of Airbnb for warehousing in some way. Then we believe it's critical, as I mentioned before, that we give the possibility to the consumer, to the buyer, to reduce the cost of delivery by coming to a pickup location. I think it's going to dramatically contribute to reducing the cost. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, making it more accessible playing field for all consumers in terms of access to digital services, because we want to avoid what we used to call in France the digital divide between people who have access and people who don't have access.
Great. Thank you very much. And then if we end with Omonii, if you have anything that you would like to add where you think e-commerce is going to be in the next 5-10 years in Nigeria, and what your top two things to improve would be.
Thank you. I would like to agree with Mr. Lawani. I think the old discussions has to do with an element of trust. Payment is an element of trust. E-commerce is an element of trust. And as much as we can build those trust value chain into all those segments of the market, I think this is going to really show or shape the future of e-commerce as a whole. Most of the vibrant market that we know that is driving the key e-commerce today is all about trust that is based on. So, and I feel that all these infrastructure and challenges relies back to one thing, which is trust, and making sure that we can build those infrastructure that is required to support desired growth. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. So there is definitely growth in the e-commerce space in Nigeria, and it is still growing. And even just with the panelists here, there's definitely some exciting things in the pipeline for where we're going to see it go. And I'm excited to see that. But there is still work to do. So some of the things that were touched on just then is that there needs to be some more innovation to solve those issues, more awareness. The basic digital infrastructure needs to be developed sort of to give access to digital services to all, so there isn't anyone left behind in this. Trust is definitely a big issue, and it sounds like steps are being taken by you guys to address that. But yeah, we need to look at some, it will be interesting to see how that space develops. I will now pass back to Nigam, who I think might give a couple of closing remarks, and then pass over to the Q&A.
Great. Thank you very much, all. That was a really, really interesting discussion. For those of you watching now, please, the QR code to the larger report is there. It has lots of data and insights that are cross-regional. So if you are interested in e-commerce, please do take a look at the report. I'd like to thank Lagos Business School and our panelists, as well as our attendees, for joining us. If you have other questions, the emails are on there. And even though Lauren has actually done a really good summary of remarks, I suppose some key takeaways from all of you, just to summarize this. I think, Mr. Lamani, with you, something that really resonated, apart from MSME skill and capacity building, which is absolutely essential, and awareness, recognizing the opportunity that e-commerce is the way to reach international markets. It's also the fact that Nigeria does have a lot of policies, and I think there's an e-commerce policy on the way, but implementation is a real challenge, and that, I think, does play a key part in not having trust develop at the pace that's needed. In particular, with redress mechanisms, with cybersecurity, data protection, all of that, the implementation needed is definitely stronger. On delivery, some interesting key points. One is scale, again, building scale through trust. As Romain said, maybe changing strategy a bit so that you encourage, delivery from pickup points to reduce costs, reducing inefficiencies, as Onochi mentioned. Are some of the strategies that you've all raised to try and reduce the delivery and logistics challenges. And of course, this very interesting idea of Airbnb warehouses, Roma. So we look forward to seeing that develop. That sounds very interesting. And also this very interesting point, Onochi, that you raised on AI, being sort of the kind of next emerging tech to facilitate e-commerce and the ways that it is doing that at Konga and will be doing so in the future. And also on payments from NII, from Sirbet, sort of raising the question of how do you do cross-border payments when you have kind of national payment policies, but you also need, if not harmonization, some sort of working together so that the payment system across border can work. And the other really important point, which is that you've got to have a level playing field for newer entrants and for fintechs to sort of play in the same space as well. And those were all, I think, really valid, really relevant points. Thank you again for your time. And I will move on now to questions. Oh, before I move on to questions, just one more ask from me, actually. So currently, my team is looking at AI use cases, in particular in agriculture, in climate and food security. Nigeria is one of the countries we're looking at. So if you're in the audience and you are working in AI and offering solutions in any of those sectors using AI, please, it would be great if you reach out to us. We would love to speak with you. And questions. So I'll go with the one I see first. This is for Professor Yinka, Nigam, and for Lauren. Sorry, it's gone up. So I'm going to take the last one that I can see. This is from Roland De Silva. It's centered around a question around connectivity and devices. How robust is connectivity in rural Nigeria and accessibility to smartphones to enable market growth and reach? I think I have a few stats off the top of my head, which is that in terms of actual connectivity, I think if I remember correctly, and please forgive me, it's 99% for 3G and about in the 70s, almost touching 80 for 4G. So the access to connectivity is not, a huge challenge, at least from the statistics that we hold. But we do know that network quality is definitely a challenge. So I would say that in terms of looking at device costs, so GSMA has a couple of suggestions. We've done some work around this. One is, of course, kind of regional and local production of smart feature phones, which are a bit more affordable. The second is looking at to find more efficiencies in the manufacturing supply chain, so that we can kind of reduce the cost of devices. A third, of course, which is a trend that we're seeing growing, is buy now, pay later and kind of handset financing schemes. So those are some sort of solutions that are emerging to tackle the cost, but it definitely remains a challenging one. Okay, we have another one from Samson Oladapo. Are we looking at decentralized logistics, leveraging individuals who are already heading towards drop-off points? This is an idea that might work. So I guess that's going to go to you, Homa. The idea of decentralized.
I agree.
Sorry, go ahead.
So yeah, maybe someone who's coming. I guess the question here is, if someone's going to a drop-off point, can they a pickup point? Could they do more than one collection or something like that?
Yeah. I think it's very. I mean, it's absolutely critical that there is a mutualization of drop-off location efforts, because there is no point in having 5 different networks with 5 locations competing in the same village. You want to make sure that all the pickup or e-commerce services, e-commerce-related services, are centralized in one key location in a small town, so that when you go, I mean, whether it's your MTN or Globacom branch, or whether it's a gas station or whatever else, it's great to have one location that is the location of reference for those type of services. Same for payments and top up of phone, etc., etc. I hope my answer helps.
I think so. Thank you so much. So another quick question, which is on: is there a collation of key findings from this discussion that could go to relevant departments? So if you take a look at the report, just in the executive summary and at the end, we do have a table of recommendations. It's for a variety of stakeholders, including government departments. So I encourage you to look at that, and I hope that it's helpful. Another quick one, which is this forum facilitating the assessment of the UNCTAD Rapid E-Trade Assessment for Liberia? I believe the UNCTAD E-Trade assessments rest very much with with the UN. So no, but we did have a lot of conversations with a number of UNCTAD offices in building this report, and we are very grateful to them for participating in those and providing the knowledge that they had. I think there's a couple more questions. From Evans. In most cases, the cost of logistics tends to be higher than the cost of the product itself. How has Conga tried to harmonize this to encourage more consumers to be joining e-commerce platforms and at the same time not disadvantaging logistics companies? I recently received payment for goods bought, but unfortunately the money was put on hold for 21 days. This is a long time for a business, for a payment to be completed. Can this be made quicker? That I think, Onochi, it goes to you.
Okay, so I'd say if we're looking at logistics fees in relation to the price of an item purchased, right, it's a very recurring thing that we find out, right? But I'm sure Roman would agree with me that the cost of logistics is a factor really not of the price of the item. It's a factor of where is the source, what is the weight of the item, what are the what's the distance item is going to move through, really, and which particular assets are using to make that delivery, right? So it's a constant challenge which we have, and what we're just trying to do is to have different points to try and make deliveries. As you said, is as Roman said, one of the big things which we're trying to push on is to get more collection centers. So as it is today, if you're purchasing on Conga, you have the option to have delivery direct to your home, or you could have delivery to drop up at one of Conga stores. Because in addition to the general e-commerce which we do, we also have physical retail stores on Conga, which are spread across the country, right? So if for customers who have decided to choose the pickup option does try and help to reduce the particular cost when it comes to delivery. So that's what we've done in that regard. So I don't, in terms of payments that are made and delays, right? I mean, 21 days actually sounds like there might be something in particular for this particular instance, right? We don't really have them stay this long anymore. It's usually a case of within 24 to 48 hours, any payments that are trapped usually get resolved. 21 days is actually slightly different. But I don't know if this is a particular case that that is in relation to Conga itself. And you could just search me on LinkedIn and just send me an email with the order number. We should be able to track that quite easily.
Roman, did you want to come in? Yeah.
Yes. I think what is a critical aspect is to manage the customer's expectations in terms of range and cost of the service, because if you're living in Kaduna or if you're living in Onitsha, you're not going to order your cooking oil from Lagos online, right? I mean, or your rice. Doesn't make sense in terms of delay of time frame, and doesn't make sense mostly in terms of cost. So the challenge, I think, for everybody in e-commerce is to try to find the right balance between the inventory that we can move forward as much as possible, because those are high rotation products, and it makes sense to order them online, like beauty. I mean, what we deliver the most is hair extensions. So I'm not a customer, but
yeah,
we deliver for all the leaders of hair extensions industry. It's a huge market, obviously, in Africa and in Nigeria particularly. So we need to strike the balance, to define the tipping point or the balance between the type of products we can move forward, and the job of Quick and other players is to help ensure that those inventories are safe and are accurate, and they can be shifted to the customer. They can be shipped to the customer very quickly, and Conga has been trying to do that for years, and they are pioneers in that domain. Jumia as well, but it needs to be much more decentralized, as somebody asked before. And then at the same time, we need to be clear that there are some products who are going to take years to become available as a convenience, because this is not New York in the sense of convenience services. It's not going to turn into New York overnight. So managing customer expectations to that respect is critical. Because if you're in Kano and you're ordering a fridge on Conga, well, it's going to cost you a lot of money. At some, I mean, until there is some additional maturity in the market, it's probably a better solution to order from your local. I mean, I don't want to ruin any strategy, marketing strategy on each, but there are some products that are still more affordable to buy at your local branch. Okay, if it's available, and that's a great thing that we can solve with e-commerce, is that products are available countrywide, but there is a trade-off, and the trade-off is time and cost.
Absolutely. I think it's very valid to consider how beyond the cities, how do you scale e-commerce beyond the cities? It is very challenging with the costs and the limited market size.
This is why pickup locations are vital, especially outside of Lagos.
Okay, great. We have a last question and we are out of time, so I will quickly answer it. And this is, will GSMA open capacity building programs to boost e-commerce in these countries? So no, that is not quite what we do. We did do the research, but this would be beyond our mandate. However, you might find interesting, our digital inclusion program has been looking at recently also at women micro entrepreneurs. We've done a large research on micro entrepreneurship and the use of mobile phones and what are the differences, gender differences and gaps in that use, especially for business. If one of my colleagues potentially might be able to put that report in the comments as well for you to access. So we do have some work on this, and we encourage you to look at that. But not capacity building programs. With that, I want to thank you very much for joining us today and wish you a lovely rest of the day. Thank you again to Lagos Business School and our panelists for their time.
Thank you.